The annual Labour Party conference starts today in Manukau, Tāmaki Makaurau, and with tightening polls, spiking inflation and only a year to go before the general election, the country's expecting answers on rising crime and the cost of living crisis. Senior politics lecturer from the University of Auckland, Dr. Lara Greaves, no Ngāpuhi, is with us now. Tēnā koe e hoa. Thanks for joining us.
Kia ora.
Now, public speeches by the PM, finance, party and union spokespeople are planned. What else are you expecting this weekend?
Well, Labor's in a really tricky position, as you highlighted in the opening. They've had falling poll numbers. There's clear places where National are really hitting them in terms of the memes, hitting them on the social media, hitting them in the rhetoric in the House of Parliament as well. And so it's really tricky because they need to really maintain their current situation, and they're 5 years into governing, and they really need to present some kind of clear articulation of why people should vote for them in 2023 and give them another term. And so I'm not sure whether they'll do this and kind of rebrand or refresh or relabel at this conference, but that is something that they could do.
Now, it's a little bit different these days, right? Because in the old days, they only needed to worry about media for getting messages out. Social media changes the whole landscape, and now in a break from the norm, Labour's Deputy Leader Kelvin Davis does not have a public slot this weekend, will only be addressing a closed session. Any thoughts as to why?
Well, they've actually come out and said that that was a mistake in the last few hours, and said that it was something around the scheduling that they had mistakenly put Kelvin Davis in a non-public slot, which is Joe Moyer on Newsroom reported it recently, and it's just like, okay, that's a bit disorganised and strange, isn't it? You've got this Maori deputy leader who isn't meant to be in this private speaking slot. Not a good kind of start to the conference to put such an important person in the wrong slot, I have to say. And yes, I would say, picking up on that social media point at the moment, there is a lot of sniping backwards and forwards between Labour and National. And I think what people are really looking for, you know, with the cost of living crisis and inflation and all that, what people are really looking for is a real positive articulation of what each party will do. But at the moment, they are doing a lot of sniping, a lot of back and forth, that kind of politics that puts a lot of people off.
And so the comms people have a much bigger job to ensure that their messaging is correct. And as you pointed out, this is a bit of a mistake. So who's responsible for something like this, do you think?
I'm not sure, honestly. And it is that thing of, though, when you're a government that's been in for 5 years, and when you're getting charged by the opposition and others with saying that, oh, well, you haven't delivered on policies, that the statistics for the cost of living and things like that are getting worse, it's kind of bad to be making gaffes and mistakes like that. And that's what we really need to look forward to, or look for in 2023, is both parties, actually, both Labour and National, kind of looking like they've got it together and that we could really trust them actually governing.
Now, the open session has no contribution from the Maori caucus or the Maori branch of the party. Is this not being seen as important?
Well, that's again another really hard one. At the moment, Labour is coming up against two big issues: free waters and the kind of negative framings of the Independent Māori Health Authority. I don't necessarily think that Māori voices coming back at sort of majority voices in that case would be the most helpful thing going forward. But Labour's got to be really careful in terms of the Māori seat, because the Pāti Māori are really kind of nipping at their heels. Both MPs have gotten a lot of press, and we're also seeing National increasingly picking up Māori candidates. James Mega and David McLeod have both been announced recently standing in general seats. So Māori voters, it's going to be hot competition for Māori voters in 2023. So they've got to be really careful to not be complacent and kind of act like they own Māori voters in any way. Because
there are a few hot topics. You've mentioned some that would be good to have some Māori comment on. Do you think they see other kaupapa as a little bit more important?
Well, it's not really clear what that positive articulation of a future government under Labour is. And I think that that's what we can expect to see from both Labour and National in this next year. That's their key challenge for both of them, is to try to figure out to voters, firstly, why they should even turn out to vote. Because again, that negative back and forth isn't something that motivates turnout generally. We know that from all the academic literature. But they have to really try to articulate a positive vision for New Zealand, show that they've got it together enough, of course, to govern, but to really try to articulate that positive vision. And at the moment, it's looking like it will be a bit of a debate around things like the cost of living, around inflation and poverty and inequality in housing, so a lot of those economic issues, but also really relatedly crime. And I think that those are the kind of things that New Zealanders, Maori, like everyone are really looking to see like what's the solution here and what each party is going to do differently, and that's going to be the key challenge in these next, I guess, 9 or so months before the election.
Well, we'll have to wait and see. We'll be keeping in touch. Senior Politics Lecturer from the University of Auckland, Dr. Lara Greaves, thank you so much for your time today and your insights. Ngā mihi.